Okay, where to begin? I'm going to try to make this fast. Sometimes your friends say something so misinformed that you want to make an entire half an hour video to walk them through it, but you know they're only going to watch about 2 minutes, so let's see how quickly I can say this. What the debate basically breaks down to is what should you do first and foremost if you want to help the planet, if you want to reduce your footprint. Should you stop driving or reduce driving so as to cut down on CO2 emissions from vehicles, or should you stop purchasing animal products in a fight against animal agriculture and its impact on the planet? Obviously, you should do both, but there's only one that you can do right now easily, and which one actually has the greater impact. So two levels there. There's one as far as actual achievability, and there's another one, which one has the greater impact. Those go hand in hand, because even if one was the greater impact but it's not achievable, then you don't really get to count it. Fortunately for me, I'm on the side of the argument that is both the most achievable and the greatest impact. Now I just have to prove it. So my friend sends me a couple of screenshots of these graphs that he found on a website that say that CO2 emissions from vehicles are way higher than CO2 emissions from animal agriculture in California. I did a quick Google search, and guess what the first result was? The website with the graphs that my friend sent me. Way to dig deep, buddy. I'm really impressed with the research you did to back your side of the argument. Now, how many things are wrong with this data that he is presenting to me? Let's count. Just a side note, I'm not going to use this as a major piece of evidence, but we are looking at California, a place notorious for its traffic problems. If you look for the same information, but expand it beyond just looking at California, if you look at it on the global level, CO2 emissions from animal agriculture actually are greater than vehicle emissions. But that's not my best argument or my best evidence. Not even close. Number one, to narrow down your argument to CO2 emissions when animal agriculture affects the planet and the atmosphere in so many ways in addition to CO2. In fact, cattle themselves, their main problem with emissions is methane, not CO2. But in addition to that, if you want to just focus on a cut and put a band-aid on that cut while the patient's jugular is gushing, then you obviously are looking at exactly what you want to look at instead of trying to fix the problem. I can quickly and easily go to other websites and find absolutely devastating headlines and devastating graphs showing that animal agriculture absolutely eclipses all emissions from vehicles across the world. You don't have to limit it to cars or trains or anything. All of them combined. But here's where it gets more interesting, and I kind of suspected this, and sure enough, I found it by digging a little bit deeper, like my friend should have done before trying to back his stupid argument, is that graph, the CO2 measurements for animal agriculture, are only looking at things that happen in the processes of animal agriculture, like some burning process that takes place in creating fertilizer and something that takes place during the fermentation of milk in dairy industry. It's not including almost everything else about animal agriculture. It only measured those outputs of CO2. And if you look further down on that page and read more closely, it says that vehicle emissions associated with animal agriculture were listed under transportation, not under animal agriculture. I've witnessed this firsthand over the last couple of years in my documentation of Point Reyes National Seashore, so it gets me pissed off pretty quickly to hear these things. While I'm out in Point Reyes National Seashore, I am seeing these absolutely massive trucks carrying these massive containers that haul all the stolen milk from the mothers and their babies in and out of the seashore, in and out of the seashore. Transportation, transportation, transportation. And then you've got all the cattle trucks. You've got all the trucks that are carrying the beef cows out of there. You've got the ones that are taking the mothers after they've had a few years of working as a slave without ever seeing their children. Then they get hauled off to slaughter too. So you've got all those 18-wheelers moving in and out of there. But in addition to that, you have all the trucks that are out there, the big ones, the big earth movers and the big loader trucks that are scooping up poop all day long because these cows shit out an absolutely mind-boggling amount of shit, and those are emitting into the atmosphere. And then in addition to that, you have the trucks that are hauling in feed, not just into the seashore, but all the way from out of state. In fact, now that I live up here where I live, I pass those trucks on my way to Tahoe. And not just one or two, I'm talking about repeated 18-wheelers carrying hay and carrying silage as supplemental feed, not for humans, but for cattle. All these vehicles to produce the most inefficient food that you could possibly think of trying to create. And I didn't even get to the manure spreading vehicles, the ones that have a sprinkler system shooting out of the back for the liquefied manure that they put all over the land. And then there's the giant trucks with the dry manure that they put all over the land. Oh, wait, and then when silage harvest season comes, then there's the combine tractors out in the field and the big loading trucks that go beside them to get all of that. Oh man, how many trucks can I think? Of course, obviously they all own pickups and they all have their 4x4s and they also have their ATVs. And that's talking about a small, tiny, organic, local, sustainable example. I'm not even talking about the big, nasty, disgusting productions of cattle and animal agriculture. So even if we did compare only on the basis of CO2, and you get a graph that isn't biased in favor of animal agriculture by leaving most of the emission creating factors out of the graph, you'd still lose. But here's the real bitch of it. This is an excuse not to do something that you don't want to do. And I just finished a video complaining about this, about how everybody always wants to point at something else when you are trying to do work for good. When you're trying to create change, they're like, yeah, well, no, I think that this is more important over here. No, I think that's more important over there. And it's just an excuse not to pursue change in your own life. And the easiest form of change that you could do in terms of accomplishability is to change your diet. You don't want to. It's difficult in the sense that it's a change of habit and you have to break habits and you have to be willing to be a responsible person who doesn't put taste buds and selfishness above the greater good. That might be difficult, but above and beyond that, it is just changing what you put in your shopping cart, or these days, what you type into the computer and have delivered to your doorstep. That's it. This isn't the dark ages when you have limited options. Everything I used to eat as a meat eater, I can get now in another form. And the options are fantastic and they're all healthier. You'll have plenty of excuses, plenty of absolutely idiotic things to say, from the nutritional value of bovine lactations for your child to the fact that our flat deer teeth mean we're supposed to eat meat. Bottom line is, it's all BS that supports your selfish desire not to change. And any physical demands or needs that you claim that we need from animal products, I destroy that myself because I haven't put any of it in my body for 3 years. And speaking directly to my friend, I am physically superior to you, even though I am older than you. So continuing on with this theme of people creating excuses, and really the issue is that they just don't want to do it. Let's talk about my friend again a little bit and the CO2 emissions, because he has the luxury of living where he wants to live due to a good financial status, and he is in the city and he doesn't have to drive. He still does sometimes, but he doesn't have to. And I had to leave the city for financial reasons, and I still bicycle or walk almost everywhere that I go. That is commendable. You know, walking or using public transportation in San Francisco is only logical. Driving in the city is stupid. But out here in the suburban hell that I live in, and yes, I agree that urban sprawl is horrible. Urban sprawl is horrible. Human development is horrible. You look at the Bloomberg breakdown of land use, and urbanization, urban development is about that compared to the land use for animal agriculture in the United States, which is that. So back to the whole not driving thing. When I moved to San Francisco, I sold my car. When my friend moved to San Francisco, he bought a car. And then he bought another car. Currently, we both mainly drive only when we're trying to get to a specific destination like the ocean or the mountains or something like that, or a vacation destination that you fly to. So, bottom line is that I'm doing both. And I'm doing the one that has the greater impact. Other CO2 emission factors that must be considered. How about our wonderful friends that store carbon for us, the trees that are chopped down because of animal agriculture? Tons, literally tons of CO2 being released into the air with the devastation of our forests, which, yes, sometimes they burn down on accident, but the absolute massive majority of the destruction of our forests is because of animal agriculture. And not only do you destroy our carbon storage devices, you replace it with the problem. It's insane to support that. Here's an interesting little ecological ditty I picked up in the last couple of years as far as carbon sequestering goes. Did you know that small plants are actually important in carbon sequestering as opposed to just trees? Now, when I say a small plant, I mean specific small plants. I'm talking about native perennial plants that actually have deep roots and can actually take carbon down into the soil. Once again, animal agriculture destroys those. It gets rid of those plants. It replaces it with annual introduced agricultural plants that have roots about that deep. And then they dry up and die every year and turn California into a fire hell. Which leads to even more of our trees, our carbon storing friends, burning down and going away. And the video will be too long if I start to talk about how these drought conditions are already related to animal agriculture and the amount of water being diverted from our land, from our plants that are trying to survive, for these water guzzling gigantic bovines. So not only are you getting rid of the trees that help us, getting rid of the small plants that help us, and replacing it all with things that hurt us. My friend and I are both fans of the ocean, so if we're going to talk about the love of the ocean, let's talk about the amount of life being pulled out of the ocean for the fishing industry, which in part is because we like to eat meat, but the larger part of that is it's going to feed livestock. Did you know that? Did you know that chickens eat more fish than sharks do? All this stuff being pulled out of the ocean in order to feed livestock. Or how about the dead zones in the ocean being created by the runoff of all of these factory farms? And not just the factory farms. Take it from me, these small family farms are a goddamn pollution nightmare themselves. The factory farm ones just don't even seem like they can exist, but they do. They exist to the extent that they create dead zones the size of states in the ocean. Stop supporting that shit. When you think about the things that I've said, for you to turn around and say, yeah, well, you should drive less, that's probably a better idea, you need to be slapped in the face. And again, all it takes is for you to be willing to change your diet, you know? Whereas people not driving means, for most of them, that would be a job change or a location change. And some people might be able to accomplish that, but you know, when's the last time you moved and how much work went into that? How hard is it to buy and sell a home? How hard is it to uproot from everyone that you know socially? How hard is it to uproot from your job or get your job transferred somewhere else or find a new job? Even if you're willing to do all of those, it's pretty hard and it's going to take some time. Or you can change your shopping cart. I thought I was done. I'm sorry, I'm not. I've got to talk about acreage. I've got to talk about the fact that each cow uses up like up to 3 to 4 acres of land each. Now, efficiency, food production, efficiency. My friend and I both dabble in gardening. My friend has a way bigger yard than I do. In fact, when I look at my friend's yard, I imagine being able to grow everything I need to eat. Now, let's talk about climate change and efficiency and not needing to drive to the grocery store and all the waste produced by animals. And let's just rewind humans back to the old days where they had a plot of land, and if they wanted to be efficient and get all the food that they could, now could they grow some crops and some plants in their yard and diversify? Or they could put a cow in there, a cow that eats every plant that you've got within the first month, and then you've got to start hauling in feed in order to keep feeding that thing and bringing in water to feed that thing as it turns your yard into a wasteland, and you have to figure out some way to get rid of the excrement. And maybe X years down the road, you can slaughter the poor thing if you and your children haven't gotten too attached to it, because these animals do have personalities, whether you want to believe it or not. But in the end, you have a devastated yard where you could have had crops in the acreage that a cow uses up. And since my friend is big on urban sprawl and that we shouldn't spread human civilization, this graphic is for you. And I agree, we shouldn't keep spreading, but I don't know how you're going to stop that, but I do know how you can change your diet. Manure from a dairy that milks 200 cows produces as much nitrogen as in the sewage of a city or a human living settlement that consists of 5,000 to 10,000 people. Dairies are even worse than towns.